When Queen Camilla bent down to speak with Princess Charlotte, she didn't realize that Catherine was watching, and what happened next changed everything. It all started like a typical spring weekend in the royal schedule, planned down to the minute, packed with family obligations and set against the backdrop of Windsor Castle. But something about this particular gathering made Princess Catherine feel uneasy. Over the years, she had learned to trust her instincts, especially when it came to her children. Leave a comment with number 1 and join us as we uncover the royal family's deepest secrets. That day, Charlotte was unusually quiet, not irritable or angry, just withdrawn, as if she were trying to blend into the background. This was completely unlike her. The family had gathered at Windsor Castle for a private lunch, held in honor of one of the Queen Consort's recent charitable initiatives. Occasions like these weren't uncommon, but they brought multiple generations of the royal family together under one roof. Camilla's circle, Catherine's family, and often a mix of extended royals didn't always get along seamlessly. Catherine didn't mind these events, but she was always cautious. While Prince William could comfortably slip into his role, she had to stay alert to everything. That afternoon, Charlotte was asked to join a group of younger royal cousins in a side sitting room. The space was formal enough, but by royal standards, fairly relaxed. The children were expected to behave properly, make polite conversation, and enjoy afternoon tea, while the adults socialized in the main hall. Catherine helped Charlotte to her seat, kissed her forehead, and left the room with one last glance. Everything seemed fine, at least for the moment. But something had changed after that. About 45 minutes into the gathering, Catherine was speaking with a senior courtier when she caught sight of Charlotte walking past an open doorway in the hallway. She wasn't crying, but her face was pale and her lips pressed into a tight, thin line. She looked hurt, not the scraped knee kind of hurt, but something deeper, emotional. Catherine excused herself mid-conversation and followed. She found Charlotte standing alone at the end of the hallway near a service door. The child's hands were tightly clasped in front of her chest, her eyes fixed on the floor. "What happened?" Catherine asked softly. Charlotte hesitated. "Nothing, Mother." But Catherine knelt down to Charlotte's eye level. "I know when something is wrong, dear." Charlotte's voice was soft. "Camilla said you were bragging. She told you not to talk unless asked." Catherine blinked. "When did she say that?" "When I answered a question for Louis," Charlotte said. "We were just playing a guessing game," but she was angry. Catherine didn't respond right away. She pulled Charlotte into a hug, calm on the outside, but inside everything had shifted. She had always tried to maintain peace with Camilla, even if their relationship felt more like a forced dance than a natural bond. Camilla had her own views on hierarchy and decorum, and while she often masked them with a smile, her tone sometimes revealed more than her words. Still, Catherine had believed that the subtle digs and occasional dismissiveness would never be directed at her children. But she had been wrong. Later, Catherine sat beside Charlotte during the family walk through the gardens. Camilla walked ahead arm in arm with King Charles, chatting as if the morning had been entirely without tension. Catherine watched her closely. Now it wasn't just about the comment. It was the fact that Charlotte had felt the need to hide how she was feeling. After the garden walk, the family gathered back inside. Catherine observed everything subtly. At one point, Charlotte reached for a second scone at the buffet table. Camilla turned, glanced down, and said with a half-smile, "Perhaps one is enough, darling. We wouldn't want to appear greedy, would we, once again?" Now Catherine saw it clearly. This wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern. Small moments that on their own might not seem harsh, but when directed repeatedly at the same child, they began to add up. Catherine didn't react right away. She wasn't the type to make a scene, but her silence was always intentional, and now she had every reason not to stay silent any longer. William hadn't noticed anything. He was tied up with Charles and a few senior aides discussing the schedule. But that evening, back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine would bring it up not as a duchess, but as a mother who could no longer ignore what she had seen. But before that conversation could happen, something else occurred. Catherine didn't enter royal life expecting it to be easy. She understood the responsibilities, the unspoken rules, and the need to maintain a public image while facing the realities behind the scenes. But one thing she would never accept and never tolerate was anyone making her child feel small, especially someone within the family. The moment came just after the tea was cleared away. The adults moved into a sitting room connected to the main exhibition hall, an old routine dating back to the Queen's time. The children were allowed to stay for a while before being taken upstairs by the nanny. Charlotte entered with George and Louis, her expression neutral. She sat by the fireplace, flipping through a book taken from the shelf. At that moment, Camilla walked in holding a glass of water, softly laughing with a long-time aide. She looked cheerful. She saw the children, gave a brief smile, then turned back to the adults. But just minutes later, the laughter faded. George and Louis had moved over to their grandfather, standing beside Charles, while Charlotte remained seated in the armchair. A few minutes later, Charlotte politely asked Camilla, "May I play the piano for a bit?" Camilla turned around. "The piano, yes," Charlotte said. "Just a little softly." Camilla took a sip of water, then looked directly at her. "Darling, that's not necessary. Let the adults have some peace. Why don't you sit still like a proper little lady, not loud, not cruel, but deliberate?" The words were sharp. Charlotte's cheeks flushed red. She quietly closed her book and folded her hands together. Catherine heard it. She was standing nearby talking with Lady Lansdowne. Her eyes shifted from Charlotte to Camilla. She didn't say anything right away, but her gaze lingered longer than usual, and Camilla noticed. Their eyes met for a moment before Camilla looked away. The room carried on. Conversations resumed, but the atmosphere had changed. That night at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine put Charlotte to bed herself. The house was quieter now. William was finishing a call with his private secretary, and George was already asleep. Catherine sat on the edge of Charlotte's bed and asked, "Were you upset today?" Charlotte looked uncertain. "A little, but I'm okay. You don't have to pretend," Catherine said gently. Charlotte nodded. "Granny Camilla doesn't like it when I talk too much." It was the truth, direct and unmistakable. Catherine kissed Charlotte's forehead, stood up, and walked down the hallway. Passing William's study, he looked up. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm trying," Catherine replied. William leaned back in his chair. "What happened?" Catherine told him everything, not angrily, but clearly. She repeated Charlotte's words, then described Camilla's cold remarks, the dismissiveness, and the repeated efforts to diminish Charlotte's presence. William listened without interrupting, but when Catherine finished, his jaw clenched. "We can't just ignore this," she said. "I agree," he replied, "but we'll handle it carefully." The next morning, Catherine decided to keep Charlotte home, skipping the next scheduled event. It was a charity garden project that Camilla had arranged for the royal children. Catherine made the excuse that Charlotte had a mild cold, but the truth was she didn't want her daughter in that environment any longer, not until she was sure it was safe. The news reached Camilla that Charlotte wouldn't be attending. She said little, just raised an eyebrow when an aide mentioned it. Then she muttered, "Probably too delicate to handle a bit of mud." Catherine heard that too. Royals often say more than they admit. The situation might have ended there if not for what happened the following weekend. It was a small, private dinner at Highgrove. Charles had invited both William and Catherine, hoping for a relaxed evening. The plan was simple: spend family time, reconnect, and discuss upcoming royal tours. But when Catherine entered the main sitting room with Charlotte, who had only come to say goodnight to her grandfather before bed, things escalated quickly. Camilla barely looked up from her chair by the fireplace. Charlotte entered, offering a polite smile, and said, "Good evening, Granny." Camilla didn't return the smile. Instead, she said, "You're not too tired to be here? I hope it was a thinly veiled jab," and everyone in the room heard it. Catherine's eyes never left Camilla. This time, she didn't wait until afterward. Her silence alone was enough to shift the atmosphere. The polite smile she'd worn upon entering was gone, replaced by something sharper. She turned to Charlotte and said calmly, "Why don't you say goodnight to Grandpa and then head upstairs with Anna?" Charlotte, a little confused, looked at her mother. Catherine nodded gently. The girl walked over to Charles, hugged him, and then left the room with the family nanny. As the door closed, a heavy silence filled the room. Camilla remained seated, still holding her glass of wine. She glanced around, then muttered quietly, "The child's too sensitive, isn't she?" William stiffened. His father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but Catherine stepped forward, choosing her words carefully. "No, she's not too sensitive. She's a child, and she deserves to be spoken to with kindness." Camilla raised an eyebrow. "I didn't mean that. I'm just surprised she's still awake at this hour. There's nothing to be upset about." Catherine didn't blink. "It's not just tonight. This has been happening for weeks. I've heard what's been said to her, and so has she." The room grew colder. Charles tried to intervene. "Darling, perhaps we should—" "No," Catherine cut him off, calm but firm. "If it were just a single comment, we might let it go. But this isn't one time. It's a pattern, and I won't stand by while my daughter is made to feel lesser." Camilla looked to William, hoping he would speak, but he remained silent. His silence spoke louder than words. "I've tried to keep the peace," Catherine continued, "because that's what's expected of me. I've overlooked the off moments. But this is different. This involves Charlotte, and I will not let anyone, no matter who they are, undermine her confidence." Camilla set down her glass of wine and finally leaned forward. "You're reading too much into this," Camilla said. "You always take things too seriously. Children are resilient." Catherine's expression didn't change. Children remember how they are spoken to, especially by those who are meant to protect them. There was no drama. Catherine didn't get angry or raise her voice, but the strength in her tone was undeniable. It was the voice of a mother who had drawn a clear line. William finally spoke up. "We're only asking for basic respect. Charlotte hasn't done anything wrong. She's just being herself. That shouldn't be a problem." Camilla looked to Charles, but he remained silent. He knew better than to intervene. Catherine was drawing a line, and once she had, there was no turning back. After a few tense minutes, Catherine excused herself and left. William followed shortly after. Upstairs, Catherine sat again by Charlotte's bed. This time, she didn't ask if something was wrong. She simply held her daughter's hand. "You haven't done anything wrong," she told Charlotte. "You were polite, you were kind, and that's all I ask of you." Charlotte looked up at her mother. "I tried." "You don't have to try to be perfect," Catherine said. "You just have to be yourself." Downstairs, Charles tried to ease the tension by changing the subject. Camilla said little. She didn't apologize, but she also didn't offer any further justification. That night at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine and William talked in their private room. Catherine remained calm, but the day had clearly worn on her. "She doesn't have to like me," she said, "but she must respect Charlotte. That's non-negotiable." "She will. William replied. "Because we won't let this go on." The days that followed remained polite but different. The next event was Charlotte's school performance at Lambrook, and Catherine decided to invite only close family. Camilla was not invited. The palace cited a scheduling conflict, but those involved knew the true meaning. In the press, nothing changed. Smiling photos were released as usual, showing unity and grace. But behind palace walls, a shift had taken place. Camilla still appeared at major events, but she kept her distance from Charlotte. There were no more offhand remarks, no lingering glances, at least not within Catherine's earshot. But Catherine had drawn a clear line. And even in a family built on centuries of hierarchy and deference, some boundaries cannot be crossed without consequences. However, things were far from settled. Camilla had been warned, but she hadn't forgotten. And the next time the family gathered at Balmoral in the summer, another moment pushed everything to the brink. Balmoral has always been Charles's refuge, a place to breathe, to walk, to think, without the glare of cameras. For decades, it was the late Queen's favorite retreat, and the family still honors that rhythm. Every summer, they gather there. It's tradition. But this year, beneath the fresh Scottish air and peaceful countryside, the mood had shifted. Catherine agreed to come, but with boundaries. She and William brought all 3 children as usual. Yet Catherine made it clear to William that she would never leave Charlotte alone even for a moment with Camilla. Everyone arrived according to the multi-day schedule. Charles was the first to greet them at the estate, arms open and cheerful. He adored his grandchildren and looked forward to spending time with them. Camilla arrived a day later, accompanied by her usual entourage and a carefully selected wardrobe. She had remained silent since the incident at Highgrove. She hadn't spoken directly to Catherine since then, only exchanging brief, formal words at public events. The first few days at Balmoral passed peacefully, long walks, horseback riding, dinners filled with laughter. Charlotte began to relax. Catherine saw her daughter gradually return to herself, chatting animatedly at breakfast, running across the fields with George and Louis, even helping a kitchen staff member bake cakes one afternoon. But then the moment came while Catherine was in the sitting room with Lady Sarah Chatto and a few aides. William had gone fishing with Charles. The children were playing in the garden, supervised by 2 staff members. It was the first time since arriving that Catherine had taken her eyes off them for more than 5 minutes. Then a palace aide leaned in and said, "I believe Princess Charlotte is in the sunroom with the Queen." Catherine froze. She didn't move immediately, but those words echoed in her mind. Without explanation, she excused herself and quickly made her way toward the sunroom. As she approached, she heard 2 voices. One was Camilla's, the other Charlotte's. Catherine paused and listened. "We don't always have to drown out others," Camilla was saying. "What matters is listening. Sometimes your mother forgets that too." Charlotte didn't respond. Catherine opened the door. Camilla looked up, surprised. "I'm looking for you," Catherine said evenly. "I'm looking for you, my dear." Charlotte stood up and walked straight to her mother. "We were just having a conversation," Camilla said, her tone gentle but with a hint of edge. "I heard that," Catherine replied. Camilla raised an eyebrow. "The child was just—" Catherine cut her off, still calm. "The child is just a child, and she doesn't need to be corrected every time she speaks." Camilla crossed her arms. "I've raised children. I know when a girl is growing up too fast for her own good." "The child is growing up just fine," Catherine said firmly, "and she will do so without being made to feel like a problem." There was no yelling, just clarity, the kind that leaves no room for argument. "I want to see more kindness shown around her," Catherine added. That shouldn't be too much to ask. Camilla said nothing. Her silence was calculated. But Catherine no longer cared. She had spent years protecting the institution. Now her focus had shifted to something far more important, protecting her daughter. After they left the room, Catherine knelt beside Charlotte in the hallway. "You did nothing wrong," she whispered. Charlotte nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "You never have to be afraid to speak up," Catherine told her. By the end of the weekend, palace staff noticed that Camilla kept her distance. During meals, she sat farther away from the children. She made no comments about their behavior, clothing, or tone. It was a subtle shift, but in the royal world, subtlety means everything. Catherine didn't explode. She didn't cause a scandal, but her presence drew a boundary no one could cross. Even Charles, who hoped time would ease the tensions, knew better than to intervene. He loved both women dearly, but he understood that when Catherine stood firm, she did so with reason and final resolve. That summer ended with the familiar photos, the family on the castle steps, smiling for the press, waving to supporters. But inside, everything had changed. Camilla had lost what she hadn't realized was slipping away the tolerance Catherine had maintained for the sake of appearances. That tolerance was gone now. And while the world saw a united royal family behind closed doors, a mother had made sure her daughter would never feel small again. Thank you for watching the entire video. Please like and subscribe.